The American Jobs Report and the report on where the economy is heading is showing dangerous warnings. Let's take a look.
The economy is sputtering. We learned this morning that job growth in the past 3 months has all but ended. There were just 22,000 new jobs created last month, and new revised data showed the economy actually lost jobs in June, the first time that's happened since President Trump's first term, back when most of us were still in isolation during COVID. And unemployment ticked up to 4.3%, the highest in nearly 4 years. An economy that's stalling out is bad news for any president, but particularly for one who got back into the White House in large part because of what voters saw as his economic acumen. When President Trump didn't like last month's jobs report, he fired the head of the agency that compiles it. This morning, he placed the blame on his economic nemesis, the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Jerome, too late. Powell should have lowered rates long ago. As usual, he's too late. I'm joined by a terrific group of reporters here. Anne-Marie Horton of Bloomberg, CNN's Matt Egan, Abby Livingston of Puck, and Ested Herndon of the New York Times. Matt, take us through some of the numbers and what they mean.
Yeah, Dana, look, this was another brutal jobs report, and this really suggests that after years of historic resilience, the job market is facing some serious trouble right now. I mean, hiring has basically stalled out to almost nothing, right? Just 22,000 jobs added during the month of August. That is a fraction of what economists were expecting. It's crazy to think that not even a year ago, back in December, the economy was adding 300,000+ jobs. Now we're, not even 10% of that. And as you noted, we saw that June was revised lower to show that for the first time since COVID, the U.S. economy actually lost jobs. So that ends this nearly 5-year streak of uninterrupted job growth. That was the second longest streak in American history. It's now over. And then the unemployment rate.
Look, this is not my forte, but from what I understand, at least like through anecdotes and through what I have seen with all the discontent, it doesn't even feel like those jobs that are supposedly new job opportunities, new job openings, people looking to hire employees, any of that is even real. Like I've seen no evidence to whether or not that's even a real situation at all, and all evidence to point to the contrary.
So you mentioned that ticking up from 4.2% to 4.3%. That's not high per se, but it is the highest since late 2021. And Fed Chair Powell, he has said that that's the number one indicator that he's looking at for evidence of weakness in this job market. I think that we shouldn't rule out the possibility that this is just a slow patch and the economy.
People are about to find out that the Biden economy was good. It was the world economy that wasn't. Now you'll have a bad U.S. and world economy. No, it wasn't even good. The U.S. economy wasn't good necessarily. It hasn't been good. Okay. The metrics that we look at, the metrics that we examine to figure out whether or not a liberal capitalist nation's economy is good is already distorted. It's already out of whack. If the U.S. economy was always good, because it was great under Obama, right? Post 2008, post recovery. It was great under Obama. So why did people turn around and vote for Donald Trump the first time? This is a question that one must ask themselves. It's one that I keep repeating. It's one that I keep repeating over and over again. And that is precisely because that economy wasn't working for many Americans already. Okay? That economy already wasn't working for many people. And that's why they wanted to hatch it through the system, through the establishment. They wanted to destroy it with the hopes of rebuilding. They took a shot in the dark at someone like Donald Trump, who was implementing some populist and dare I say, fake left economics in his campaign. I mean, it's a lie, right? And it obviously clearly was a lie. We know that it was a lie because he didn't legislate that way for 4 years. But the economy wasn't good then either for many working class Americans. And then it got significantly worse during COVID, okay? And then there was another recovery period post-COVID where people were saying, well, you know, metrics look good. Metrics look good. Metrics look good. What are you talking about? It looks good. It's a vibe session. It's a vibe session. You guys are wrong. You guys are wrong over and over again, which led to a lot of animosity amongst the working class Americans who then said, no, f you. I'm going to go with a guy who says the real solution to this is to obviously deport 12 million migrant workers. Now, of course, that wasn't a solution at all. But in the absence of a party with a clear vision, with a clear agenda that addresses the real problems that people were experiencing, people once again took another shot at the dark at the racist guy. And we are seeing the outcome of that. We're seeing the predictable outcome of that, one that I have warned against over and over and over again. Because remember, when we look at the unemployment numbers that are at 4.3%, that's not the entire story. Like I said, a lot of the metrics that we look at, unemployment numbers, for example, or the GDP, they don't show the reality. They don't show the full story. Or we look at the stock market. The stock market is doing great. Okay? At a time when there are mass layoffs taking place, the stock market is doing so great. Why? Because they're eliminating redundancies. They're going to make up for it with AI. Is that good for you? You just got fired. No, it's horrible for you. But the stock market is doing well. Okay, well, it exacerbates the income and wealth disparity in this country that causes people to be even more angry, be more mad, demand answers, demand restitution. The goal for someone like myself is to get those people to understand that it's not about deporting Guatemalan and Mexican migrants. That is not going to solve their situation at all, because it's not a Guatemalan migrant that owns your home, that is your landlord. It's not a Guatemalan migrant that is at the board of this corporation that you work at that refused to offer you better benefits, that refused to give you the back pay that you deserve, that is yours by law. Okay? It's your bosses. It's the capital owners. And it is the duopoly that finds bipartisan consensus when it comes down to things that impact you and your loved ones in the most meaningful ways. It's their lack of interest in changing those structural forms of inequality, structural forms of violence that you experience. The affordability crisis being one of the simplest terms to help you understand. So, of course, it's creating a lot of panic right now. You got people saying, look, hiring plans fell to the weakest level of any August on record, and intended job cuts mounted amid broader economic uncertainty, according to outplacement firm Challenger, Gray and Christmas. U.S.-based companies announced in August plans to add 1,494 jobs, the fewest for the month in data going back to 2009. Of the 30 industries tracked by Challenger, hiring plans were concentrated in aerospace and defense, industrial goods, and retail. Announced job cuts jumped from a year ago to almost 85,980 and marked the largest August total since 2020. Excluding the impact of the pandemic, the number was the highest for any August since the Great Recession in 2008. Spencer Kimian says, you don't realize how weak the economy is right now. If you have a job, hold on to it for dear life, because if you get fired, it's going to take you years to find another one. But the stock market's doing well, right? I mean, it's hot, right? It's good. We're doing great. Here are all of the areas of loss for the record. There's a chief economist for the Navy Federal and a columnist at the Washington Post, Heather Long, says the labor market is going from frozen to cracking. Look at how many industries have lost jobs in the past 3 months. Mining lost 13,000. Construction lost 10,000. Manufacturing lost 31,000. Information lost 15,000. Business and professional lost 51,000. Federal government lost 34,000. Finance has zero job gains. The U.S. job market is almost entirely dependent on healthcare. That is not healthy for the economy. And it's especially because these were the key sectors that Trump was seeking to boost with his tariffs agenda, right? That was the plan, right? It turns out it's actually impacting. Another problem here is not only just a tariffs regime that is causing too much instability, but another problem here is also the deportations. These are sectors that have relied on undocumented labor. The proper protocol here should be to document those workers. But instead, the Trump administration has placed the crosshairs upon them and is making it seem as though they are the reason for why Americans are struggling, Americans are suffering. And they're taking these militant actions against these people, and it's actually cooking the companies. If you were to recognize that these are just regular workers, okay, instead of just like adding on the fact that they don't have the documentation or the proper clearance or whatever, okay, because again, that's a matter of just paperwork, right? If you go in and you say you're going to deport like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people from the labor force in specific sectors, don't you think that's going to cripple the economy? Of course. Even if these guys are like invested in hiring American citizens to make up for the lack of labor, you're firing a bunch of trained employees that have been working in these sectors for years and years and years. Of course, that is going to cause tremendous instability, if not full-blown collapse. And that's where we are. The construction industry has been facing growing labor shortages for years as the workforce ages and fewer Americans seek to work in physical labor jobs. Add to that Trump's stripping legal status from 1 million workers plus mass deportations, things are going to get ugly. At the start of the year, the nation's largest trade organization for contractors projected that they would need to attract an additional 439,000 workers this year just to keep up pace with new construction projects. Yet, as of today, the industry is losing workers. And I said this before, it's not that there aren't available jobs. You can just make new jobs, okay? You can do a federal program. You can do a federal jobs program. There is obviously need for more housing, for example. You could just be building houses with a federal jobs program with good pay, a decent salary, good compensation, good benefits, you know? The issue, however, is that people don't want to do that. People don't want to offer that. The government doesn't want to intervene in the market because that market intervention would actually harm the profit seekers and their primary interest, which is to improve their profit margins. Okay? So the only thing the government is doing is creating a new sector, the Gestapo. That's it. Instead of creating a federal jobs program that actually solves some of the material issues that Americans are facing, like the explosive housing market, we're instead creating a totally unaccountable, unconstitutional Gestapo force, a secret police force in the form of ICE that is at the mercy of whatever the this goddamn president wants to do. This is truly terrifying. And once again, for people who fantasize about the mythological, backbreaking work and the honor and service of that sort of thing, people who don't want to work in those fields at all, people who don't want to work in construction at all, that just like simply say these things from the outside, don't realize, because they've never had a relative that has worked in construction, that has worked in a factory floor. Those people don't want their next of kin to also go into that same sector because they have suffered for years and years. They their backs up, okay? That's the whole reason. They don't want other people to do that. They have been destroyed in the process of doing that. None of these people actually want to do these jobs anyway. So those who actually do take on these backbreaking backbreaking jobs should be paid adequately. They should get the proper clearance, the proper authorization, the proper documentation. They shouldn't be cast aside and discarded to make some of the dumbest, most racist in American society feel as though things are actually going well. Because that's all this is. It's to make the dumbest people in the United States of America feel comfortable that there is at least like someone who is worse off than they are. In the same way that in the Reconstruction era, the powerful entities turned around and said, hey, man, look, you're white working class, you're poor as fuck, but at least you're not black. At least you're not black. There's always someone you can look down at, you know? A separate industry organization wrote in July that mass deportations and harsh immigration policies like stripping workers of status are likely going to further exacerbate the labor shortages in the construction and cause labor costs to rise 4 to 5% unless there are mass layoffs. Economic growth will continue, but risks of inflation and recession are high. Higher tariffs will raise costs, invite retaliation, may disrupt supply chains. Okay. Harsh immigration and deportation actions will worsen construction labor shortages. Expectation of larger deficits may push interest rates higher. Who could have told you that this was going to inevitably happen? I did, and I'm a dumbass. I'm a stupid ass Twitch streamer. How the was I able to see this ahead of time? How the was I able to warn against this ahead of time when Trump was saying he was going to do this when he was running for office? I said this is only going to worsen the situation overall. It's not only cruel and unusual punishment for no real reason whatsoever other than to satisfy the urges of some of the dumbest races on the planet, because that is a great distraction for the administration to not actually address the material harms that they are experiencing, because those material harms would require to shut off the money faucet to mega corporations and harm their profit margins, right? any kind of initiative in the direction of socialization is going to harm profit margins, right? And you can't do that. So you have to create this mass distraction to make it seem like immigrants are actually responsible for all the pain that you're experiencing. And then you just keep hitting that note over and over again. And you keep pushing this button over and over again, even if it destroys the economy. Yes, I know Eric Adams is most likely going to drop out of the race. The announcement is coming at 4:30 p.m. I know, it's right here. Mayor Eric Adams to make an important campaign announcement. This comes on the heels of the Trump administration stating that they want to give him a Saudi Arabia ambassadorship job, so he stands off, so he gets out of the race in order to clear the way for Andrew Cuomo, at least, like, so with the hopes that like Andrew Cuomo could pick up more. Pick up some of those Eric Adams voters. It's really stupid anyway. But yeah, here, getting back to the Trumponomics nonsense, okay, because we're not done here. There's obviously still a lot more to talk about. Increase in both youth and black unemployment, now at 7.5%, the highest since October 2021, suggested the crackdown on immigration has not created a more favorable job market for the more vulnerable components of the U.S. labor force. Okay? Unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is now at 10.5%. Once again, this is not the whole story anyway. The unemployment rate in the way that you understand it is not the entire story. There's an underemployment crisis here as well. Yeah, welcome back. Bidenomics is funny, of course. Related, weirdly underrated Dem advantage in Virginia is that the Republican messaging is keep the great economy going, and it's obviously been getting worse. Yeah. Even the Trump administration is hitting the same Brandonization notes, whether it be permanent support for Israel and you know, constantly finding themselves tricked by Israel somehow, or even the vibe session. Ironically enough, their industrial policy has been also worse than the Brandon administration somehow. At least the Brandon administration was trying to move the needle in the appropriate direction, albeit marginal, albeit without any sort of checks or balances, without any sort of demands being made from these corporations, and just like opening up the money faucet with the hopes that they actually do the right thing that will benefit the American labor force. It didn't, but still, it was moving in the right direction. And these guys turned around and said, nah, we're moving in the wrong direction. It's amazing. All the while, they're doing the Brandon notes and talking about how, no, it's a vibe session, baby. Shut the up. Here is Mike Conzal, Senior Director, Policy and Research at Economics. What is this? Economic Security Project. It's a bad number. The new numbers that just came in. Just 22,000 jobs, and with revisions, June went negative to minus 13,000. Worse, deeper into the data, you can see that the theory of Trumponomics is failing. It's not too late to change course, but it will require dramatic action they won't take. Let's dig in. They just narrowly dodged a 4.3% unemployment rate last month and got it this month. But these aren't rounding games. You can see a steady increase over the last 2 months. Maybe it's noise, but it's the highest in years, and given everything else, it's worrying. Here's the breakdown by industry. We already covered the breakdown by industry. It's like a lot of the sectors that Trump said he was going to bring back jobs to are the sectors that have actually experienced a tremendous amount of loss of jobs. Manufacturing jobs specifically, they dropped almost as fast as the federal workforce. Okay. The first theory of Trumponomics was that tariffs would build up manufacturing work and federal workforce cuts that would free workers for them. Didn't happen. Better way to see that, the slowdown over the past 4 months versus 2024. This isn't then them rebalancing the labor market. It's a fall across basically everything. Manufacturing was also falling last year, and now following their healthcare cuts, medical jobs are finally slowing. Another less clearly stated element of Trumponomics was to bring back jobs for men. However, with tariffs attacking in those industries, men have lost 56,000 jobs over the past 4 months. This is CES data. Women have gained 76% of jobs in 2025 compared to the regular 50%. Meanwhile, another Trumponomics goal was to use deportation quotas to bring jobs back for native-born workers. But you guessed it, that's also failing. Amidst the broader weakening, the native-born unemployment rate is at its highest level since the pandemic. Fantastic. To show that the slowdown is broad, we can look at the diffusion index, or basically the percent of industries that are gaining jobs. It's now below 50% for several previous months, meaning more industries are losing jobs than are gaining them. That happens in slowdowns. Last month, they blamed the revisions, but revisions aren't driving these bad numbers with the baseline so low. And this month, you can't even blame the revisions because you put your guy in charge, right? It was the bad guy. It was the Brandon guy that was lying about the numbers. Now it's your guy. What the do you do now? But revisions aren't driving these bad numbers with the baseline so low, and revisions are one of the few cyclical predictors of oncoming slowdowns. They should learn from these numbers and turn pro-growth policies. It may not be too late. Their solution to this is, are you like, it's the same as the military, right? It's like, you want upward social mobility? Join the military. Go kill some 14-year-olds overseas, get up, and then maybe you can get free healthcare and a free college education so you can enter the job market that will literally give you nothing with 8 years 8 years after everybody else, all of your other peers went into the same job market, right? And now we're literally turning that in to a domestic military force that is also unaccountable, just like the foreign military force that we have that is completely unaccountable because it's a foreign invading force, right? And that's where we're at. That is where we're at. We got ICE. ICE is the only way that you can get a honest pay for an honest day of work. And that honest day of work is what? Terrifying random ass Americans, okay? Terrifying random Americans kidnapping people at their court hearings instead of allowing them to get proper clearance to work in this country after they have done so for a decade plus. Fantastic. You're becoming a Gestapo force and turning around and creating concentration camps. That's the areas of growth. Those are growth sectors now. Awesome. Meanwhile, this is also chirping from afar. Looks like we lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together. President Donald J. Trump. Everything around us is unwinding and falling apart.
Can rebound from here, right? I mean, job market's been so resilient for so long, but clearly this is another major challenge, and I think the warning signs in the economy are really piling up.
Yeah, and stand by, because I do want to get back to what you just mentioned on the Fed and interest rates. Instead, let's talk politics. Yeah. And I mean, yes, the president likes to say that immigration was a big issue. I'm sure it was. The culture wars, definitely. But we know the biggest reason, and it was the fact that people were hearing from President Biden that the numbers are good, let's just wait, but people didn't feel that way. Now it's the numbers that aren't looking good either.
Exactly. It's a mirror image from kind of 2021 when we had Democrats at that time kind of telling people, don't look at the numbers, don't kind of believe what's in front of you. You kind of hear that from Trump now. This is what we had kind of warned about all through the summer, the prospect that his kind of self-imposed economic crisis, tariffs driving that, could pose not just uncertainty, but a downward job market and really reverse what has been Trump's number one strength coming into this. But I also think you got to add in the big, beautiful bill with this, right? And it speaks to, I think, is a kind of hypocrisy at the heart of Trump's second term. For all the talk about his growth among working class voters, his growth among working class voters of color, what we have seen in terms of economic reality here is a bill that largely amounts to a wealth transfer, a removal of benefits from SNAP and Medicaid. And I think that's the reason why you see some of those poll numbers, particularly on the economy, reversing among the very groups that delivered Trump the White House last year.
Abby?
You know, Trump immediately pivoted to the Fed and Jerome Powell, but when I talk to Republican sources, they're all worried about tariffs, and the full brunt of that has not been felt yet. Some say we may not feel that. But politically speaking, the question I have is, does this impact the gubernatorial elections in November in New Jersey and Virginia? But moreover, when does this hit next year, if it does, and how does that affect the midterms? And,
you know, there was such hullabaloo, to use a word that probably shouldn't be used very much, Amory, over the fact that the last month, when the jobs report came out and the president wasn't happy about it, he got rid of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics that compiles them. And so the Commerce Secretary was on this morning, interestingly, before we all knew what the jobs numbers were, and was once again going after BLS, even though the guy that they removed is no longer there.
They're just bent against the president's success. They're rooting against America and against Donald Trump, and that's got to end. So he can't replace somebody, 2 weeks ago, and you expect fundamental change. But what you will get is an agency that's on side.
Well, there isn't fundamental change yet at BLS. The commissioner actually doesn't even have control over the data. The data is collected by statisticians. They sit in different units. They're almost walled off. And then once the press release is written, it's sent to the commissioner, and the commissioner then sends it off to the White House and the CEA. The one issue that Wall Street has in terms of credibility, and this is the gold standard, the jobs report, the U.S. jobs report is the gold standards of economic data. The one issue that Wall Street has is the fact that when you go out and these statisticians are looking for these surveys,
Your
the
mic is on
response
too, you
rate.
can speak. Everybody, we got LA Taco's very own Memo in the building right now. We're waiting for Miguel as well. Obviously, make sure you don't show anything to the camera, by the way. That's one right there. So. But we're gonna be heading out and getting some tacos and talking about everything that's going on in Los Angeles specifically. But before we do that, I'm in the process of covering the new jobs numbers that just came out and how devastating things are looking. And you can offer some feedback as well.
Has been so low for months. That is why we saw massive revisions last year. That is why we were seeing massive revisions now to this point where June actually you have a negative print, negative 13,000. That is a huge deal for this economy and for this Federal Reserve. So the problem is that they're not getting 100% of the data when that first print comes out. And this is why you have those revisions. When you talk about, though, the new BLS commissioner, I think only this week his nomination was sent to the Hill. He hasn't even had a hearing yet. And many are still questioning, actually, if he's going to be able to get through Senate confirmation.
Right, exactly. And then there's all of that. But then there's the underlying argument that you're still hearing from the administration, which is to blame the people who are compiling the numbers as opposed to the actual policies. Or maybe it's just the pendulum of the economy.
Yeah, the argument there, it's an interesting one. It would kind of be like if you had an NFL owner, right, whose team just lost big, and instead of changing the quarterback or the play calling or firing the head coach, they go out and fire the scoreboard operator, right? I mean, you might not like the score, but there's probably some bigger issues out there, and shooting the messenger is probably not going to fix anything. But to get back to something we were discussing earlier about the self-imposed nature of some of this, let's look at manufacturing, right? So tariffs, they're supposed to be propping up manufacturing. And what we're actually seeing is that U.S. manufacturing lost another 12,000 jobs in August. This is not an anomaly. It's the fourth straight month of job loss.
It's interesting because they were talking about how this is like the Trump administration has claimed that this is the one area of impact that they're going to fix, right? And part of that was, they were saying that we're going to do this with like tariffs and it's going to boost domestic manufacturing. But in the absence of like a robust industrial base or a robust industrial plan, there is no real trade to protect. And the existing trade that we have, or the existing manufacturing that we have, is on the poultry side, is Ford F-150 pickup trucks, and perhaps more consequential than both of those things, our military industrial complex. And even then, especially with all of the AI initiatives that we're taking, which is created as a mechanism to displace the existing labor force, the Trump administration is obviously failing disastrously to improve the manufacturing jobs numbers. The other side of the story is, of course, the mass deportation policies that they implemented, claiming that as long as we fire and deport violently the existing labor force that some of which is not getting the proper documentation that they deserve after working for years and years on U.S. soil and participating in the American economy in very meaningful ways, it's frying these corporations that have lost significant chunks of their workforce. So it's a real, cut off your nose to spite your face situation here.
Right.
And it's crazy because like it's being done to distract people away from the real economic harms that they're experiencing and the anger that they have, to soothe their anger, to say, you feel this way because it's Mexicans. You feel this way because it's Guatemalans. You feel this way because like they're taking your jobs, and it's complete and utter bull.
I mean, I think what's his whole plan is to free up jobs so that Americans could take jobs that immigrants currently have, which is not going to happen. And then when they said that, nobody's going into the farm fields, he said people on Medicaid are going to go in there and do the work. People that have disabilities. Yeah. I mean, it's his whole job plan is disastrous.